Your official contact for the best alternative talk on the planet. KGRAradio.com.
My gosh. Are you listening?
However you are and whenever you are, welcome back, good people of the planet and beyond, to Paranormal Now. This is your host, Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. We're live from Spreaker and rebroadcasting every Wednesday night, Thursday morning at 1 a.m. EST on KGRA Radio. Tonight's guest is, in fact, Commander Cobra and fellow KGRAer who hosts Task Force Griffin on KGRA every Sunday at 6 p.m. EST. And honest to goodness, I think you'll really dig tonight's show, as we'll be taking to the skies and covering ground, the likes of which we've not particularly focused on before on Paranormal Now. So we'll be pulling back the obsidian curtain and lifting your mind and eyes to the skies. So stay with us. Cece will be with us in just a minute. Share your thoughts and experiences with us during or after the show on Facebook, facebook.com/paranormalnow, Instagram @paranormalnow, Twitter, paranormal_now, and of course, check out our new channel, Paranormal Pop, on YouTube. So obviously when we do this show, the format is we have a guest on, we pick a topic or a couple of topics, and we spend the time digging deep into those things and discussing them. Often, being that I have multitude of conversations with people on and off the air, and my own personal interests in ufology and the paranormal, just like you, there's so many other little things I'd like to talk about that I just don't get a chance to do. So on Paranormal Pop on YouTube, this channel is going to allow us a chance to just talk about whatever and whenever. So the latest video that I literally just posted about a half an hour ago before we went live is the first in a series of videos that I'll be doing that will be covering fake ufological, paranormal news, and fake science news as well, / conspiracy theories. So in this particular news article, we're talking about the Chinese Chang'e rover and whether or not they actually proved that the NASA USA landings were in fact faked. So why don't you go and check that out and let me know what you think. If you have any feedback, I'd really appreciate that. And in my research of doing that, I thought this is pretty cool because I've noticed myself and a lot of other people struggling with how to pronounce the rover Chang'e. I found this YouTube channel, CGTN. You can check it out yourself if you want. I'm just going to play the audio from that. I think you'll really appreciate it.
This image was sent by the probe Chang'e 4.
The Chang'e probe.
The probe, called Chang'e 4,
China's Chang'e 4 probe has entered its planned orbit.
Chang'e.
It's Chang'e 4. Chang'e.
And that's it. So for the rest of you out there, problem solved. We all know how to pronounce it now. All right, so my guest is Commander Cobra. He is the host of TF Griffin. He's a retired U.S. military officer and aviator, stationed and operationally employed all over the world, including Europe, the polar regions of the Arctic and Antarctic, Central and South America, Australia and New Zealand, and Southwest Asia. When not presenting, researching, and delivering the show, he works as a professional military contractor, primarily for aviation in areas of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, ISR, operational test and evaluation, OT&E, and operations supporting military and law enforcement. He also serves as a substitute school teacher for high school and junior high schools in the area. He taps a lifelong network of friends, colleagues, and occasionally former adversaries with new discoveries, insights, and experiences for his show. As he often recites, I grew up in the military and aviation, all I wanted to ever do. Very blessed to have had a chance at so much. Often when I look back, the playbook resembled my mad spy versus spy. Welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much, Paul, for having, Alan, for having me.
That's right, and thank you so much for jumping in last minute, because just so everybody knows that Commander Cobra saved me by filling in tonight for a canceled guest, so thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. And, it's occasionally that the bridesmaid does get to become the bride, so I'll take that bouquet and run with it.
You are welcome. Honored to give you the bouquet. So there's a number of things that I would love to talk with you about. And as you and I spoke earlier, and I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that I really haven't spent much time looking at things from a military perspective. Kevin D. Randall has been on the show, and we've had a number of discussions, but mostly, specific towards a certain event, Roswell or the Aztec or, the Socorro crash. And we would sort of dig into the investigative work done there. But I think you offer another perspective onto the field of ufology and paranormal, if you will. I don't know how you group those two things together. That I think will be really fascinating for everyone tonight. How does your experience as an aviator inform your work into ufology?
Well, I'll back up just a little bit.
Sure.
I grew up in the New England states. My dad was crazy mad about UFOs when the 60s and 70s was really booming. Mm-hmm. I grew up with a number of the books. In fact, I wish I had some of those paperbacks that he had, because I read most of them, or at least dove into different parts of them when I was younger. They would be collector's items now. Some of them are impossible to find. If you are able to get to a good secondhand bookshop, occasionally you can find them out there. But I grew up with that kind of interest. He probably sparked it. Early on, I wanted to fly, and I wanted to specifically fly in the military. So my whole goal and drive all through school was to get to that point. So I was very, very fortunate. And that's what I speak of when I say I was blessed to be able to do what I really wanted to do. The part that it's not really clearly in my bio is a lot of the things that I was involved in through the course of my career did resemble Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy. I still think of that as the kind of the playbook for a lot of the activities that we were involved in, and how things have changed in the 30 plus years or so that I've been associated with that.
Yeah. Matt is still published, right?
Say again?
Matt is still published, I think.
Oh, I think it is, but it's not on the same schedule that it was.
Okay.
In fact, I was in a secondhand bookstore earlier today, and I had picked up a copy.
Yeah.
And I was looking at, I think it was a 2003, and it had some pretty funny stuff. Their way of editorializing was and it remains pretty classic. They have a great view.
I don't know if you have any local papers up there, but in New York we have the Onion. You familiar with it? Yeah,
and I check their website out on a fairly frequent basis. They are sort of a grown-up Mad Magazine. Right. They have a very unique strain.
And I have to say, I was actually, speaking of the funny editorials and tricksters, I was almost tempted to cancel on you at the last minute and then say April Fools, but I thought, no, not cool, not the best joke. But to everybody listening tonight, happy April Fools. There is no April Fools going on tonight. This is just a regular show, and I think that you'll enjoy it. Mad. I remember as a kid, people I don't think I was allowed when I was a kid to have that magazine. I remember other students bringing it into school, and it was this big deal, to take it aside and look at it. Kind of like when Cabbage Patch Kids first came out at my age. I was really young. I mean, it was this salacious thing. Now that stuff is it's nothing compared to what's available every day.
Well, definitely Mad was breaking with a lot of norms that probably did resemble something of a small revolt, as I precede you by a few years. So Mad was a little more accessible, but I kind of grew up in a similar household where stuff like that wasn't wasn't encouraged or allowed.
Right. Well, how do you manage fake news like I was speaking about earlier? I see it all the time on Facebook and online. People are sharing articles and no one's taking the time to research whether it's, and this, I mean, obviously there's a problem politically, but in the world of ufology, I think it can be damaging. It's not necessarily the most detrimental thing. But I think it's sad when I see people sharing it and going, "Oh my God, you see, it's a conspiracy." And I'm like, wait. Let's look at this and find out if this is true or not.
Well, there's a couple points that I'd like to draw. The first part is that the seeds of this are sown early on in I think military operations. Going back to ancient times, you would use deception as a means to draw your enemy into the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And that's been around since groups have met and fought over whatever, land, resources, religion, whatever the case may be. Right. I actually attended a number of deception courses over the years. Something as simple as if we were going to do an insert to insert teams, we would make multiple landings or use multiple aircraft and a number of landing sites so that we're being tracked. It would make it more difficult for the enemy to figure out where we had put those teams in or what was the actual area that we wanted to go forward with. So that conduct, that activity, which is for a good purpose, morphed into, especially in the Cold War years, post-World War II, where communications had changed greatly. Radio and then television, rapidly following, really changed the network of the globe because you could get information moving faster. When the UFO specifically interest really grew in the 50s, 60s, where it really peaks, the military found an effective way on the face of its deception, to use UFO enthusiasm and people that were interested in it to feed them disinformation, to cover actual programs that were being flown as a means to have people see things and think they were something else. That was useful in a number of areas when we were in a fairly heated contest, although termed the Cold War, to maintain some advantage, some time limits.
Is that in the category of misinformation? Is that
sure? Yeah, it's misinformation with, I think, I'll say the good intent to to provide security. And I'll give you another case in point. Sometimes information on how test flights were flown, because we have a very open society in the United States and overall in the Western world, sometimes there would be modification of test results in such a way that we wanted, primarily in those days, the Soviets, to think that we had not been successful when we were, to keep them from spending money in one area or have them spend it in another. One case in point, when we were doing a lot of work with terrain following radar, which allowed our aircraft to fly very, very low because of the enemy air defense systems that were integrated, we developed a series, as well as other countries were doing the same thing, that would allow very fast, supersonic, sometimes almost twice the speed of sound, manned aircraft to fly and hug the ground in rough terrain. Mm-hmm. And it couldn't actually be flown very easily by a pilot without this capability. So to navigate and to do that, that crew would use a very sophisticated radar, and then, of course, the burgeoning and developing early computers to be able to successfully fly this. And a lot of those results were shown as failures, which would, people would complain. The press would come out and talk about how much money has been spent on the system. This thing's a stinker. It doesn't work. We've wasted it. The Pentagon is wasting money on going on that. I bring that up because that allowed for the advantage to be actually developed. It was actually very, very successful, and we were able to have it years ahead of other people. And keep that point in mind, because it's going to come up again on a couple of the things I'd like to share with you tonight, or at least talk about. Mm-hmm. The other part of that is it also gave birth to, in World War II was especially the bed of this, the black program itself, the black budgeting, which because of the Manhattan Project and also things like the Philadelphia experiment, which was talking about the basically the radar or the cloaking of ships, there was a need to not have in public discourse what is going on to be easily seen, so that, quote unquote, the enemy cannot determine where we're spending and how much we're spending in these areas. We have a name on there, but you don't know the amount of money that has gone against that. Sure. And that's a way of making you move forward. So those kinds of activities are legacy to what we are seeing today. The other thing that's happened is with the development of the internet, and it's explosive. I mean, it's amazing how short a time, just the way we're producing this show and we put our radio shows out, unheard of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Nothing was at the point where it is that we can self-produce and put that kind of information out. It's difficult, though, when you look at an incredible tool that we have, the ability for falsehoods to be entered into the system and believed very rapidly because of the kinds of groups that we formed on the internet, the ways that we do that. So once again, we have an explosive advance in our communications capability, and with it comes a huge amount of disinformation or false reporting on purpose, because people want notoriety or they want to throw you off. They want to deceive you in a particular direction. And it's become a very effective tool, part of our lives, and it's also coming at a great cost, because many institutions, many things that people relied upon are not going to survive. They're not going to stay the same way. It's going to change.
Well, how much?
There's no choice.
How much do you think it is more circumstantial and cultural? Meaning, the FCC, for instance, had power and influence. Like, we don't have that really anymore. Correct. So we don't have that sort of regulation. But is it really just that, or did people just think differently? I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was a certain sort of decorum, or
many of our cultural norms, which I think you're pointing to, have changed. It simply has changed.
Like before you put anything out, you decided, okay, am I covering my tracks? Am I covering my bases? And then you release whatever your research might be, and specifically more journalistically. But these are all through the filters of companies. And now, like you said, we have people that are self-producing and getting out information, and they're not accountable. There's no editor for them. So if we would have taken those same people and put them back in 1980 and said, you have no regulation, then would people be, freaking out or embracing it like they are now?
I think probably it's not a fair comparison. I think the rejection or the freaking out, as you're phrasing it, and I agree with that, would have occurred because we're society-wise, we're changing. We've changed culturally, that things that were very strong institutions, and I'm not trying to put a good or a bad value against this. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible in the description. Things that were foundational pillars of society have changed shape or are no longer there. They've come down. Religion is a very instructive point on that. It's changed dramatically in the last 30 years, especially in the United States and on the North American continent. It's had a huge change in what it has for power, what it has for orientation, for what people want from it. and it's morphed into many subsets, so that certain sets of beliefs are met and certain kinds of emotional and spiritual needs are met. And again, I am putting no good or bad value on that, but that change is critical to understand, because there was a study that was done, I believe, in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, RAND study. It's quoted, it's talked about a lot in the UFO world, where if the release of the positive release by a government that the contact had been made, or there was a strong belief that there was extraterrestrial life and they had the capability of making contact with us either through visitation or some other form of communication, that the world was going to come tumbling down. It was going to throw off our belief in God. If that happened, our commerce system would grind to a halt, because people would be so upset, so thrown off by this.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, we could, it would be a huge shift of that. So when you take that into depth, you can see where, if we were to talk about it now, it's a lot less crazy, quote unquote, to have UFO discussions. I mean, our kinds of things that we're interested in, the people that tune in and listen and correspond with you and myself and all the other members of the community at large, KGRA and Inception and further on, is not in the same vein as it would have been 20 years ago, 30 years ago for sure. It's just not as crazy to talk about. And I think what we have seen in the last 18 months with Stars Academy to the Stars and some of the things that have come out there, you see that, I see that mainly as preparing or at least testing the public reaction to it. And it caught a lot of people's attention, but it didn't have the heart-stopping event that I think many people were testing. And then we can talk about that more if you'd like.
Well, yeah, even if you look at ATIP and its release, a lot of people were actually fascinated by this. And even lay people were like, oh, well, that's interesting. But no one lost their mind.
Right.
And I really do think we're at the point now that if the government was like, okay, it's official, we've proven that extraterrestrials are visiting our planet, and here they are, I think there would be some gasps, but I think it would just be fairly momentary, except for obviously some extremists. Most people would go, yeah, well, okay, we're not that surprised.
Well, let's explore that for a quick second.
Sure, let's unpack that.
Or let me throw this question back at you for a second. Do you think, Alan, that ATIP ended in 2012 as it's kind of reported?
Well, that's like asking me if Project Blue Book ended or
Fair
Project
enough.
Sign. I mean, technically,
so
no.
We've established our bona fides. We both agree that that kind of a statement is rather silly on the face of it.
Yep.
And you have to smirk. Even the most stalwart person would look at that and have to smirk at that kind of a statement. So we agree on that. I think what is probably the most driving force for not coming forward, if this has occurred, I think it has. I don't have any I don't have any proof that it particularly has happened. Nothing that I have seen. God knows I wanted to see it and experience it. But the lie has gotten so deep, I think that there are some folks that really want to maintain that they don't want to be held accountable for those kinds of fibs and lies. I think that that's part of it. I also think it's one of those things that those that are in the know are able to hold some kind of status, real, imagined, or someplace in between those two, that they are maintaining to and clinging to, because power is power.
Oh, let me just interject here.
Sure.
For those that may not be quite familiar, ATIP is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that was introduced by Harry Reid, I think 2007 to 2012, right?
Well, he talked about it. He threw some support into it. There was varying types of programs like this. And it worked in two areas of aerial phenomena. It is a legacy program from studying what, quite frankly, the Soviets were doing, and based on what people were seeing and dealing with during World War II, what the Germans were developing, and then things like Operation Paperclip, which tried to bring in the science and engineering to rapidly bring up advances, why we entered into this face-off with the East. That's the legacy of it. The other part of it, obviously, is that they're looking at phenomena, and it's a kind of a cute by half way of saying it. Well, we're looking at the phenomena. We're not really saying right off the bat if it is extraterrestrial or if it's of this Earth and it's another country that's done it, or is there something in between those two? So it's a very careful lawyer type way of talking about the program's been around a long time. Mr. Bigelow and Mr. Reed, Senator Reed, were together, and they were able to secure some funding, very modest amount of funds, I would add, to continue to look at this as a program. And I think their focus was more onto extraterrestrial, paranormal kind of aspects that were occurring with it.
Right. Okay, so we're going to have to take a quick break. We're already just going a little bit over, but I didn't want to stop because we're just getting to some really interesting stuff here. So when we come back on the other side, I'd like to ask you, do you think that ATIP really was just, and this is probably the skeptic's point of view, but do you think that ATIP was really just two Arizona buddies pork project? And what other skeptical explanations have you heard that you have been able to debunk yourself, if that's the case? This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. My guest is Commander Cobra, and we are just getting into this. I mean, there is so much behind the black curtain that I know we won't be able to cover in one show tonight. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss a moment. Alan B. Smith, hang in there. We'll be right back.
For years, the KGRA digital broadcast station has been your contact for live UFO paranormal talk radio worldwide, bringing you the top names in research and investigations 7 nights a week. Our listeners connect to the KGRA on various platforms like TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many more. Now, you can stream your favorite paranormal talk radio shows with our new fully integrated custom KGRA mobile apps for Android and iPhones. Listen to your favorite paranormal talk shows from any mobile device 24/7, free with smartphone or tablet. Utilize custom features to access news, show pages, archives, contests, events, and live interactive chat rooms. Set show notification alerts and never miss your favorite live programs. All free and available to download in Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey folks, guess what the number one phrase that Life Change Tea receives by email? You ready? We love this tea. We love this tea. Time after time, week after week, we love this tea. Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America one tea bag at a time.
Poor water quality is a major health issue, and it's only getting worse. Municipalities can't keep up, standards have dropped, and pollutants are increasing. Where does it all end? It ends by keeping the pollutants outside of your home with HydroCare's advanced systems available at Wave Home Solutions. No less than the best purification materials and processes have been developed by HydroCare to provide you with healthy, clean water for drinking, cooking, and showering. HydroCare far surpasses the competition in removing chlorine, odors, iron, lead, chemicals, limescale, and much more. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water. We'll take care of the toughest water problems for you, whether it's from a city or well source. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, call 888-997-WAVE. That's 888-997-WAVE. Or go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRAradio.com.
You're listening to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith, your host, and taking us out of the break was Friends Don't Lie by Septembrio, and I'm sure you recognize the music from one of my favorite shows, Stranger Things. Septembrio is a great band. They got permission to use their song in their own song, so it's one of my favorites to play here on Paranormal Now. If you want to find out more about Septembrio, just go to septembrio.com. Okay. Moving on, let's get darker and let's get grittier with Commander Cobra, the host of TF Griffin on KGRA Radio. So, Commander Cobra, we left it off at the break with a question, and I'd like to hear your take on the skeptics explaining away of the ATIP. As nothing more than just a program, rather than an actual investigation.
Well, we have some very interesting people on the face of it. Obviously, Senator Reid, a very long and somewhat distinguished career in the Senate. Mr. Bigelow, both of them are apparently close. They have a friendship or an association, both from Nevada. Mr. Bigelow is a very, very interesting. I'd love to get a chance to meet him. He seems to be a very genuinely entrepreneurial and interested. His time alone with what he's done with Skinwalker Ranch and the activities there is pretty impressive in my book. But one must ask, or at least look at the face of it, are these by chance, by happenstance? Why at that point in the good senator's career, at that point in his business life, that Mr. Bigelow did all these things that come together, right, to have this involvement and to do these contract work. And remember, ATIB is a Pentagon program, completely separate to the activities that were there. You can think of Mr. Bigelow's activities to some degree, I would say, to use the term, is a project or a subcontract to those activities going on. So there's a lot there. If you go back to my earlier remarks of, I weigh everything very carefully. I look at it with a Sun Tzu kind of approach, meaning, why is something like that coming out? Why is information coming out like that? Why is it not remaining secret? What is the purpose behind it? There's a lot of possibilities. There could be internal whistleblowing or the word coup is obviously flown around, so it's very common in our current situation. But there's like an internal desire to shake things up and to reveal information and knowledge belongs to everyone kind of thing. I think that's part of it. I think there's other things that are going on that may be done for other purposes of maybe of a political nature, maybe of a world engagement as well. I will say one thing that I like to make this remark, and I do this often. As you know, I'm very good friends with Mac Maloney. That's the reason why I got into this broadcasting, because I worked with Mac on one of his original shows that was on KGRA, and that's how I met Race. And then when the station made a move, Race and I talked, and he said, you should try doing this. And I've been very fortunate to work with folks like you, I think, who really have talent. And this is no false modesty. I pretty much have a conversation on Sunday nights that I'm home with some very interesting people, and I've been very blessed with the result. But Mac has put out a number of books, and he's put out a number of pieces out there. And I'm convinced that you must always look at what is the desire ultimately. And I think sometimes if it's to destabilize, it's to change things, it's to throw your attention in a different direction while your pocket is being picked in another. And there's some element of that to me going on with this. Overall, the timing of it was very interesting, the way that it was played, and then how quietly it's dropped off since then, with promises of more information, to come forward. I think the people that are involved are very genuine. I don't have any real claim, or disagreement with anybody, but it just seems a lot of the things that are thrown out in a breathless mode aren't that breathless. And I'm wondering, and I'll give you a reason why in a second.
Sure.
But I think it has a lot to do with the way the deck has been reset with the present occupant in the White House. Our President Trump, I think, really has, if there's a chance that we're going to have a big reveal of information, we're probably in the very best time period for that, because he doesn't seem to play well or in anyone else's camp on that. And he seems to be very forthright on that. And I think there's a lot of desire to constantly be taking attention away with what he's doing.
But then there's the question of motivation behind that.
Yeah, I think that that's the conditions of the environment that we're in, and people use whatever they have to get what they want or to maintain their control in situations. So I think that's a big part of it. Hopefully I've at least brushed upon an answer on that. Well, one other thing I wanted to throw into you, and then I'll respond to your comment. The number one way of doing intelligence gathering right now, or it's explosive, is because of the internet and it's crowdsourcing information. One of the reasons it's so attractive is you don't need lots and lots of people with security clearances. You can set up banks and banks of people working in buildings or dispersed all over the world that do nothing but check and source out certain terms, certain types of, the famous, the very common thing you hear now is chatter. Mm-hmm. So I feel that a number of these releases that we had were to crowdsource and to gather information. Who was talking about it? How did it disseminate out? Where did it go? What were the reactions? What were the kinds of things that are being said? And I'm pretty sure that you agree with me, Alan, that anything we write on email, anything we say on a phone, anything we text is not private.
No, it's certainly not. No.
So,
and I think what's scarier is even anything we say, because how many times have you had a conversation about something and you really don't remember searching it, and then that ad related to that topic comes up on your phone or something, and it's like, what this? How is this possible?
Yeah, it seems uncanny, and it's not. It's not uncanny.
Yeah.
It's we live in a surveillance state. There's no doubt about that.
Right, and what scares me is not as much that we're in it scares me we're in a surveillance state, of course. But is that information all being recorded? That's even scarier. because we know what people can do with information, right? They can manipulate it, they can change it to fit their agenda. So
look what has happened on the grand stage of people who live in the sphere of the public. People cannot be hosts of shows or celebrations because of something that they said years back. Obscure things that were written when they were in high school show up.
Right.
Things
thank
that
goodness we
look
didn't
like
have
what
that.
they said are added to other things that go into that false information.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about, and that's in things that are fairly open topics. You take that now into paranormal things, UFOs in particular, or the extraterrestrial explanations, or the things that people are seeking. How much easier, and when you get into that realm, into that subject area, is it to manipulate things that were said, not said, and produce it as a document? If a document was produced on you tonight and myself, Alan Smith and Commander Cobra. In fact, I have a very famous thing that I used to send out on the show, Commander Cobra versus the United States government. All my years in, I ended up going to a federal magistrate for entering into an Air Force base incorrectly with an aircraft. And I was there on Air Force business, and I actually had to go. It's very funny outcome of the story. It wasn't very funny when I was going through that whole process.
Sure.
And why I'm going to the magistrate, I'm still doing this, supporting this test project for the Air Force. So there you go. If those documents could look very realistic, they could be up there on various websites. They could be picked up by a number of the news outlets. It would be all over the place, and you and I would spend, the next 10 years trying to clear our names.
Yeah,
that's a very powerful tool that can be used against people.
Oh, and it is. Though I have to say, there is a new art form evolving around that, and I think, though I am not a fan with Trump's public displays, right? It's just not my style. Maybe I'm old school, right? I just don't like the way certain things are said about certain people.
Sure.
I think it's very unbecoming of a professional, because I always think in terms of, what if that was my high school teacher or principal? What if that was my boss that I worked for now? That's just me. I think there's a certain way to behave when you're a professional. However, what he is brilliant at, and what I've noticed with all kinds of people in multiple genres, and coming from different perspectives and points of view, is a way of it's almost like what you say, I'm rubber, you're glue. What you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. It's like that philosophy somehow. And a good example is someone who she's called Comic Girl something, I don't know, on YouTube, and some people. And for the most part, she's a liberal, right? But then, some other liberals were attacking her or something, or saying she was lying about this or that. I don't know if it was political or not. But what she did was, she responded with a video admitting her guilt in utter sarcasm, the entire video, and it was wholly entertaining. And what it was saying, fine, you know what? I can't fight this. This is, people are going to say crazy things, so I'm going to have fun with this. And when you behave like you're not guilty, then the effect is not as poisonous. Of course, what you and I are talking about is a little bit more nefarious.
Sure.
Because we're talking about recorded information.
You're correct. It's definitely in the same vein.
But it's in the same vein. So I wonder, should someone, try to take information on you, twist it, turn it around? I mean, how would Commander Cobra react to that now?
No, that's a good question. I guess I would partially think that I would fight if it was something that I thought was worthy of fighting. And a lot of times I find myself just walking away from a discussion when people decide they're going to go off what I consider the course line so far in a direction. Give you a case in point. I had a guest on. I wanted to talk about the new media, how it fueled conspiracies, how it was going on. And that guest had an agenda that they wanted to go a different direction. They wanted to turn it into a political. I don't do a political show. I don't like politics. I don't like that that part of the world. It's an inseparable part of how we all live. I understand that, but I'm not going to waste my time trying to. You can't wash yourself clean in that mess.
Right. And that's why I love shows on ufology and the paranormal. For the most part, hosts keep it neutral.
And you have to. I mean, it's part of it that we want to come out. You want to talk about it, and I think that there's interesting aspects in our different parts of our government that are important to point and look at that. And I'm thankful that we live in a country that has a document like the Constitution as our guiding principles that allow us to talk about these things. Now, with that said, this person was going down a direction, and I never, I'm not one to shut down on a guest. I never have had to do that. But I had to actually tussle with this person a little bit on air because they were just going in a direction. And once I kind of gave them back some of it and kind of made it clear that, look, that's just not how we're going to fly with this, no pun intended, they backed down. I think the thing that's difficult that we are all going to have to grapple with is that you have to make a judgment, and many of us are not willing to look. We've already made up our minds, and we're able to go out and find things that fit the scenario that we want. The internet has provided us the color wheel that you have a conclusion and you go forward with that conclusion, and you can come up with evidence or what you think are facts, or at least information that back it up. It doesn't follow logic. It doesn't follow scientific method.
Exactly.
And that's been the tragedy of this. I think the other tragedy is we have a tool. I mean, literally tonight, you and I could write letters back and forth to us in any language we wanted to, get it translated online, send it, translate it back. I'm able to keep up conversations with people that have, they don't speak English, and I obviously don't speak their tongue. They don't speak it as well, that we can have long conversation. You can throw that back and forth. We're not doing that. The world's not getting closer because of the internet. In fact, we're probably forging some rather large division lines with this incredible tool that's in front of us, and we're surfing porn. If I understand the metric, that's like the largest thing that everybody's looking at.
Right, but then
at any given moment on there. So instead of looking to the skies, talking about this kind of thing, trying to find out if we have the discernible proof in front of us, I believe it's probably there. If we're able to put it together, we're not spending very much time on it. About 40%, maybe less, looking into important things, and our more carnal desires are being satisfied or amused, maybe a better word. And to me, it's an interesting shame that that's where we're at.
Okay, so Stephen Bassett was on the show, and he thinks that not Trump, but the downfall of Trump followed by Mike Pence, or the next president would be, particularly Mike Pence, would be when disclosure would come. And I just find it interesting that that's his take, and yours is, no, Trump's the guy that you think would be most likely to let loose.
I think, let me give you a couple. I'm going to give you a roundtable kind of look at this.
Sure.
No connection at all to the Trump administration. I, like yourself, cringe at some of the things that are said that seem that, but I think I kind of understand the man from the standpoint that, although many people would probably disagree with me, he has a deep-seated love for the country. I think he loves the people of this country. Lots of people have, and lots of things have not gone well and have gone well with that belief. So, again, trying to not get into the realm of that, he tends to be he has a frankness about him, but he also has a showman side of him as well. And I think he looks at things and just says, well, why wouldn't I let this out. That's the reason why I think that that's a very strong possibility. I think the stronger situation that sets it up is there is such a struggle, such a in the open contest between basically people for or people against. And I think we both are going to agree with this. I don't like the term because it seems very pejorative, but I will say that there's definitely a deep state element. There is a group of people that have been in government, mainly non-elected, that see themselves as the arbiters of what will be information, what will be released, moving around in these circles to maintain power. Mm-hmm. I think if there's a way that they can try to throw things off, if there's a way that they can cause a sensation in a different direction, they will. Yeah, and that may be the impetus to having something else come out. It's curious that ATIB and the release and the things that had gone on came out when it did. I thought it was very curious, the timing.
Yes. However, in my, not so many years, but, multiple presidents, and following ufology and the stories and the suspicions and the projections, I just don't believe in any one president being the one, because I think that even if, whether it was Trump or someone else, right, who kind of was the Molotov cocktail thrown into the whole system, I think, like you said earlier, our Constitution is set up in such a way that that cocktail, Molotov cocktail, is contained, and the those that are in the know about what's really happening, just it's like a separate world, and someone like Trump would never be told. The president only has so much power, so unless he was attempting to usurp more power and go an unconstitutional route, I just don't see how he could force disclosure. I don't know. Maybe I'm just skeptical, because there's always been, every year it's, this is the year, or this is the president, and then it just never happens.
Sure. I mean, I think that one of the closest moments that we had, I mean, there was a lot of discussion. Again, I've got a couple decades on you. So President Carter, when he was running as the candidate, talked about, and it was carried in all the UFO periodicals of the day. There was no internet of any shape or form. That he had seen something when he had stepped out of I believe it was a Democratic convention in the state of Georgia. I don't think it was during the presidency. It was when he was running for governor, and it was an aerial phenomenon of some kind. And he had made a remark that was something he wanted to look into. It was greatly trumpeted. Nothing. I mean, nothing moved. That needle didn't move, and that further fueled. Hey, they get in. They're told. They see the magic books. They read the journal from the previous president that writes in there, and those journals are, each president has, and they stay in the White House. I've cast my eyes upon some of them. Never, obviously, was allowed to read anything, but I did see an area where some of them were kept. There, it's a beautiful building, the White House. I think under the Reagan years, there was a couple interesting things that were said, and it's been talked about, fairly well documented. National Security Advisor had spoke, and he had made allusion to not being the only beings. Wouldn't it be wonderful we knew, that there was more in this galaxy, in our universe? And of course, President Reagan himself very famously talked about, wouldn't it be wonderful if there's something that would unite the whole planet, that there was something extraterrestrial, and I'm paraphrasing it, obviously not a quote. And there was there's a lot of discussion about that as well. Again, within people that were interested, that are looking for that, looking for those kinds of not so much hints or just indicators, I guess, that it's coming forward. Now we had some pretty big stuff that came out, and the aerial phenomenon part of it. We've seen some video clips that have come out. The one of the pilots that was involved, made the tour on it. There were some what I call stereotypical journalistic approaches on that information, where the little green men remarks are made, men from Mars, and at this age, for people that are in the so-called profession of journalism, and I do take a very dim view of what has happened as of late to people that claim to be journalists, and the way they behave, how information is not verified, and it's just whoever can throw out whatever they are thinking at the time first.
Yeah. But let's hold it there. We're at the second break.
Sure.
But yes, I do want to talk more about like the video evidence and also eyewitness testimonies and your time in the military. Don't answer this now. We'll answer it when we get back on the other side. What reports did you hear from those that you worked with? And was there anything in particular that was compelling to you that maybe was actually an article somewhere at some time, or just never investigated? Either way, I think it'll be really interesting to hear Commander Cobra's take on this. And if you want to find out more about Commander Cobra, just go to kgrradio.com, Task Force Griffin Radio. This is Alan B. Smith. Hang in there. You don't want to miss the last half of the show. We'll be right back.
For years, the KGRA digital broadcast station has been your contact for live UFO paranormal talk radio worldwide, bringing you the top names in research and investigations 7 nights a week. Our listeners connect to the KGRA on various platforms like TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and many more. Now, you can stream your favorite paranormal talk radio shows with our new fully integrated custom KGRA mobile apps for Android and iPhones. Listen to your favorite paranormal talk shows from any mobile device 24/7, free with smartphone or tablet. Utilize custom features to access news, show pages, archives, contests, events, and live interactive chat rooms. Set show notification alerts and never miss your favorite live programs. All free and available to download in Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
This is Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith.
The brain reflects the universe.
In a sense, aren't you kind of dabbling in the occult?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a kind of vision quest.
There have been over a dozen PhD theses done about UFOs. You never hear about them. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up.
And I reluctantly moved my left hand over to my wife's leg and realized that she's in bed with me, she's not outside the door, and there's someone mimicking her voice outside my room.
Paranormal Now airing every Thursday, 1 a.m. on KGRA Radio.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find us on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code TALK to get $10 off your first box. As a special bonus, we'll include our #1 rated Lipo3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. Whatever your diet plans are, start with us at faststartdiet.com.
When you're always on the go, it can be a hassle getting the proper servings of veggies and fruits into your everyday diet. Life gets hectic, making it hard for us to always make healthy food choices. Not to mention it's pretty expensive. Wouldn't it be great to ditch the long grocery store lines, but still get your fruits and veggies all at once? What you need is Balance of Nature Fruits and Veggies capsules, made with 31 of the highest quality fruits and vegetables and grown right here in the USA. Balance of Nature is 100% natural, safe, and affordable. For a limited time, use discount code TALK and you'll get 35% off your first preferred set of Balance of Nature Fruit and Veggie capsules, along with free shipping. Call 1-800-246-8751 today. Ready for the real results you want and need? Then you need Balance of Nature. Call 1-800-246-8751. That's 1-800-246-8751 and use code TALK.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith, and tonight's guest is Commander Cobra, host of Task Force Griffin Radio on KGRA. And if you want to find out more about him, just go to kgraradio.com/taskforcegriffin. Commander, what other sites or social media places would you like listeners to go to?
Well, for general purposes, I have nothing else on the web beyond what I do with KGRA, mainly because of the work that I still do, and I have really just not spent the time to build a website. But I think it's coming one of these days. But there is a couple that I would like to just put out there for folks to take a quick look at.
Sure.
If they don't mind. Military Java Group, that's JAVA Military Java Group, is a fantastic organization that supports with about half the profits that they make from the coffee they sell back to veterans and active duty military. I spend a lot of time supporting those kinds of organizations. And the wingmanfoundation.org is another group. They are a wonderful group of volunteers that all the money they bring in and from their sales and their drives supports units and the families of aviators that are involved in mishaps, especially when there's a loss of life. They've done fantastic work.
Yeah, and that link is actually on the KGRA website.
Yes, it is.
On your page.
So it's a great group of people, and I guarantee on both of them, the Military Java Group, actually I did a show with them. It was a great show, and people can pick that up in the archives. And Wingman Foundation, I've done a couple shows with them as well. They're wonderful folks, and I can guarantee that their money that they spend is going to where they think it's going. One last thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about, our beloved Bill Skywatcher's birthday.
Yes.
Today.
Yep.
Happy birthday to Bill.
Happy birthday to Bill.
Tremendous young man that he is, and he's done a great job producing my show, brought it to great heights, much more than I deserve, and he does a lot of the heavy lift on the weekend ops, and I know that he works with you, helping you from time to time as well.
Bill is absolutely amazing, and I know he's sort of the glue in so many respects for KGRA.
Yeah, he keeps it together. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. Are you going to go to the Alien Fest in New York and Pine Bush?
I'm going to try very hard. Pine Bush. Unfortunately, I think the schedule for my work is not going to permit it this year. Last year, it got rained out, and we did a kind of like a local pre-show. Myself, Mark D'Antonio. Yeah. We went to the Flying Saucer Cafe, and we did a kind of a pre-record YouTube channel show. I had a lot of fun. Of course, the thing is, I try to keep my appearance somewhat secure. So I got accused of looking like Don Imus by Mark D'Antonio. So if you go on there, they can still find it. It's on YouTube and it's on Bill Skywatcher's channel. You can pick it up there.
Yeah. And why do you keep yourself somewhat anonymous?
Well, one of the reasons it started out when I was very active when I first started the show, it's a little bit uncomfortable for folks that I would perform contract work for to have someone talking about these kinds of subjects.
Sure, that's understandable. Yeah.
So I try hard not to put anybody in an uncomfortable spot, and I don't want to limit my my availability to work on projects because some of the work that I do now makes the difference for young men and women that are wearing the uniform going forward, especially in the realm of this what we talked about, ISR type things. It allows communications and accurate information to be put forward while they're in harm's way. So I still love doing that work, and it's very, very rewarding to do that. Then it became kind of a brand thing. Obviously, there's going to be some kind of a coming out party in the not too distant future where my ugly mug, and you'll understand why I'm on radio and not TV. In fact, I will tell most of your audience, if they've seen the movie Bad Boys 2, there's a scene where there's 2 Coast Guard helicopters flying, chasing a boat, and we disable the boat with using our guns on the helicopter. That is actually my voice that's in the movie.
Nice.
And the back of my helmet. My face shot didn't make it off the cutting room floor. One of my better looking pilots in the other aircraft did make a face shot.
But don't all pilots look good in aviators, though?
Well, we look good. Some of us just look better with our dark visor down. I'm one of those look better with the dark visor down.
All right. Well, enough self-deprecation for now. But yeah, I mean, if you do eventually retire wholly, do you think you would ever reveal yourself?
Oh yeah, I think it'll eventually come out, and we'll have a good laugh, and we'll move on. What goes next?
Right.
This started out because of Mac Maloney. I started to be a guest on his program, and in those days I was Commander X until we found out someone actually has Commander X as a trademark.
Oh, interesting.
So we had to come up with a new handle in the military, especially in aviation. You have call signs, and my rank was Commander. My call sign Cobra. That worked out, so that's how that came together.
So there's no G.I. Joe connection there.
No, that's Cobra Commander. Right. And that's a slightly different variation. But if you do listen to the opening of the show, you'll hear what race worked in as my opening for the show a number of years back. There's a G.I. Joe sequence that's going on in there. So,
interesting.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to go back and listen now. Yeah,
there's a lot of fun stuff in there.
But yes, I wanted to ask you about, and speaking of that, what people have you brushed shoulders with, with whom you have you brushed shoulders with, who have shared stories of UFO sightings, or have they not?
I've had the opportunity to ask just about everybody, from folks that their name will never be heard, to folks that have fairly famous profiles, their thoughts on this subject. And it's interesting that the vast majority of folks that I have dealt with and spoke with, especially my guests that have been on the show, I would say are in the 90 percentile that believe that there are extraterrestrials. They're supportive of that. Out of that, I'd say about half have had some kind of experience or are 1 degree removed from someone who did, meaning someone in their unit, someone that was on a ship that was with them. They've seen something on that. Now, one of the things that we all will come into, one of the very famous one that's in my collection, he is 90. God bless him. He's going to be 96 this year. John Billings. He's still flying. He flies people that for free that need to get to medical appointments in his airplane, and he still does it. He's an amazing man. He was a Black Operations OSS pilot for part of his career during World War II before he became an airline pilot. Amazing man. And I thought for sure I was going to get him to be able to tell me something pretty special. And he doesn't see it. He doesn't think that there is anything out there. So I was very surprised with it. But he did tell me that he did have an experience where he had a high-speed aircraft that far exceeded the capabilities of what they had in the 50s, come flying by him when he was at a fairly high altitude for the time period, for the type of aircraft he was flying. And, of course, radar in the days there was nothing like it is now. Everyone talked on the radios, and no one could say what it was. But he was kind of told there's nothing to see there. And they went on their business on that. And always made him curious. That shows in the archives. Very interesting man. You talk to someone like John Lear. I think it's amazing some of the experiences he's had. I think gets a very harsh rap that's not deserved. I think John has a lot to share. I think he's got some very accurate points to ponder on there. And I obviously think that he is a pretty good indicator that there is a mix of activities. What I mean by that is, when people ask me about the secret space program, in fact, that comes up quite a bit. I think we have a very active secret space program. I'm not convinced that we have everything to the point that we're using alien technology or we're in connection with active alien extraterrestrial capabilities to do that. I'm not discounting it. I just don't see anything that can definitively point to it. There are some curious developments that I think gives at least a possibility that we may have a relic or a recovered technology that we have been able to break through on. But I do believe that we have a program for operating in space that is a military program, and the reason that it is kept quiet is because it has all kinds of treaty issues, much like what you were talking about on your opening of the show tonight with the Chinese probe. We have the Israelis that have put things into space. We have plans by Japan to do things. We're seeing another renaissance period arriving on space travel. The vice president just talked that we need to be back on the moon in 5 years. So I think one of the things that has kept in check military aggression is our ability to do something from space or our ability to get accurate information from space.
Well, yeah, but I do have to wonder, when the president says build a space force, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, isn't the Air Force already doing stuff? There's no grand conspiracy here. We know that the military has had secret projects, since the early 1900s. So
I think the big difference, though, Alan, is are we putting weapons into space? I think that is probably going to be a really big break when it's discussed or it's confirmed if that's what's happening.
Well, sure, that could be separate. But as far as a space program where we're going out and exploring or spacecraft, the craft side of things makes perfectly logical sense to me. No different than, developing a stealth bomber. The military always has something up their sleeve that they're working on that they don't want anyone else to know about. And it seems to me space is just the next step. I mean, we've been to space. So if we are developing super advanced technologies, we may not want to share that publicly for fear of our adversaries, right? Getting a handle on that.
And we're back to having that edge, having that advantage. Right? I was talking about the terrain following radar. One of the things that I speak about quite a bit, and I have not been told not to speak about it because I don't have any firsthand knowledge. It's just my analysis of what I've been able to see in the open information sources. Mm-hmm. The X-43 space aircraft, space plane, that's been flying and goes up and does these incredibly long missions. Yeah. The early versions of that look like they have a windscreen capability. Now, the later ones that come out obviously are completely molded in there. I believe that we have a C or a D model that is capable of carrying occupants. And people say, well, why would you have that? Well, there are times when having a person in the loop, a human being in the loop, is critical, even in this age of drones, quote unquote drones, unmanned aerial systems, that it is a critical juncture to have the capability to have eyes at that point for different type of mission activities and different types of things that you would want to do. if your enemy takes out your satellites and you don't have the communication capability anymore, how rapidly can you put them in? How quickly can you disable theirs? There's a lot there. And I think that if you go back to some open publication that talk about in the 80s and 90s, the ability to use a suborbital spacecraft that could exit the atmosphere and come back in, you could rapidly put a large number of troops into a position. Now they couldn't be flown out, but you could beat the enemy to the spot by having a large number of people there to secure an important location. That was talked about openly as a concept for a long time back. As of late, just to kind of round this particular point of the conversation out, we're starting to talk about aircraft carriers maybe giving some of them up, which is a huge change for the American military. Our aircraft carrier force, although it has shrunk, is the largest in the world. It is the envy of most of the world because it's sovereign territory that allows you to project power in immense ways. It's incredibly important capability. It's right up there with our ability to have aerial tankers to move large numbers of aircraft around the globe. We're talking actively about reducing that capability. I don't think we're going to reduce that without something else capable of stepping into that with a new
void. I see.
Capability.
And you think that might be a space or aerial something?
I am convinced it is.
Okay. Now, do you think that we're using other technology beyond rocketry?
I think that we may be on the threshold of having Tesla-like projections going on. Is that a classy enough way to put that on there? In more plain speak, I think that we may be entering into those realms. Again, nothing that I was able to ever participate or see. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to speak about it anyways. But obviously, if I'm this free with the discussion, I wasn't involved in anything. So I would not be surprised. I think that some of the advances, some of the breakthroughs that have occurred are simply amazing. I say this often, truth is always stranger than fiction.
Right.
There's just no.
Oh yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind on that.
Just physics alone, not even counting quantum physics, right?
Right.
When you just the known physics that we have, it is bizarre, and things that are just everyday reality. Is split apart, dissected, investigated, and then there's all these other levels to this world that we live in that you don't see with the eye, you can't feel, but it's there. And what technologies could we find? I know that, for instance, if we could understand what happens beyond the point horizon of a black hole, that essentially that would open up the door to a whole new world of physics. But scientists can't even imagine what it is yet, right? They only know up until that place. So even some of the smartest physicists and quantum theorists out there know that there might be a whole other world of magical physics out there. So I guess the question is then, did somebody else already get there before us? Some other species on another planet do that? And to kind of bring this full circle, when we look at like the Tic Tac UFO or some of these other videos of a craft flying, for lack of a better word, right, moving through the airspace in such a bizarre way, to me, you're left with only two questions: is that us with super advanced technology, or is that somebody else off Earth? When you look at those ATIP released videos, do you think that that's an alien thing, or do you think that's ours?
Some of the later ones that came out, one in particular, I was not in. I had no thoughts that it was something other than remotely piloted vehicle, advanced technology that was there. The things that you see there, the techniques that were used by the flight crew, the way that they speak in that,
goosebumps, right?
No, on the later ones, no, it wasn't goosebumps. It brought back a lot of memories of very common things that happen. You're flying on a mission. You're very close to a sensitive area, and folks that are not part of your coalition decide to pop a round of some kind of system at you, and you pick it up and you see it and you take pictures of it. Or aircraft would meet, folks would meet on either side of the border when we had in East and West Germany. Very common stories happen there. The later things that came out on that didn't have that. The Tic Tac one is interesting. I had a lot of problems with a lot of the dialogue that was in there. There was to me a lot of production that went into that release.
Interesting.
I think there's some things that were very interesting in it. I just had some things that didn't seem to be in sequence properly, or had the same kind. That there was a scripted or there was a voiceover in some areas to me.
You think this was perhaps edited in some way?
Yeah, obviously it was packaged, in a certain way, and there was a lot of things that went on with that release. The New York Times angle of it, there's just a lot of stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately my impression of it was there is something here. It's legitimately of interest. It's obviously to a point where it has been solved. Here's a question I'll throw out to everyone to think about.
Sure.
We've never been able to get a real ground truth of Roswell, of the Aztec UFO incident. But yet we're showing and throwing video, making flight crews available to talk about this thing that happened off the coast of California with a carrier battle group. And I think there's a lot there. I've heard some very interesting aspects of it from people that were operating sophisticated integrated radars from other ships that picked things up, and the things that they saw that happened that went on there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're genuinely passing truthfully what they observed. I'm not sure what they observed is actually what happened in the physical world, because you can, there are the capabilities to deceive and to give false information out. I mean, both sides of the military spend lots of time trying to make the other person not know what you're doing and give false information out. It's been going on for probably from the first couple of folks that got up in the aircraft and looked at each other, as well as any other capability. So we have all this information floating out, but we don't have a lot of information coming out from age-old cases that have gone on there. I find that curious. I think the other part is that we were being measured in our response, as I said earlier. I think that there was a crowdsourcing and intelligence and information gathering process to it that was purposeful from the start.
Well, the video, the Tic Tac UFO video, I mean, it looks intelligently controlled, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't seem to be following the rules of aerodynamics.
Right. But things that don't use lift and thrust in the way that aircraft do don't follow that. If I was to tell you that we were going to be landing rockets like a 1950s sci-fi movie on platforms, people would have laughed at me. No one puts something into suborbit and then has the rocket tube flip on its backside and use jets and come back and land. And we're doing that now. One of the
SpaceX,
the SpaceX is that's how they're recovering it. So although that uses a conventional or a thrust arrangement, it doesn't mean that we haven't come up with a capability to use a different drive system that would allow you to quote unquote fly, but not use the lift techniques that we currently use now. I believe that there's probably more to that going on now than we know openly.
But that begs the question then, if that is still within the the laws of aerodynamics, right? That means it's an advanced military of some sort technology, or could be. And why release that video? What's the modus operandum there? I don't get it.
Well, to me, the MO is that you let folks like I'll just say it clearly, the Chinese, the Russians, and any others out there that you can talk about your Generation 4 and Generation 5 aircraft, this capability is here.
Are we advertising or are we calling them out?
I think we're advertising.
Interesting. Okay.
You don't call out and cause your populace to wonder why you have spent the kind of money you have spent on the military that you have to be shown up like that. If you have that information, you bury it. You don't make that available until you have the ability to counter it.
But doesn't that contradict then the idea that ATIP really is a legitimate investigation into UFOs or extraterrestrial craft or whatever, however you may...
I'm not convinced that it is. I'm not convinced that, like it says, that same piece of information, they said it stopped in 2012. There's no possible way. Yes, someone probably could put their hand on a Bible and swear in court and not be in contempt and make a truthful statement. They would not be in perjury because it's changed to a different name. That's a technical...
Exactly. No, I'm with you on that.
They're jumping off on.
Sure.
I mean, we all understand that portion of it. And there's reasons that you do that. And one of the reasons that you do that is you want the populace to believe that you're being open and frank, and you also want to send a message, and you're maybe tracking where it's going. I don't think that it is a linear situation here. I think it's a fairly complex set of lines that are going on.
But it's fair to say that the craft is not moving in a conventional manner of any commonly known technology, right?
Well, I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to put the but in there. I have had the unbelievable blessing to get to know Ralph and Marcia Ring. Again, great shows to pick up from the archives. And if you hear what Ralph talks about working with Mr. Carr, who is a protege of Mr. Tesla, and what they were doing with their vehicles that did not use conventional aerodynamic lift creating, the kinds of things that I spend a lot of time as a pilot manipulating, what they were doing with their capabilities and what they were able to do and how they were rapidly shut down in the 60s, I think you'll be amazed. It's not a well-known story. There's a good portion of it out in the internet. He is still very accessible. He answers questions. He puts a lot of information out. He's done my show a number of times, and I think he has a very interesting window into those capabilities. If you take something from the 60s that they were working on that had the ability to use different sources of power and different sources of controlling interactions with gravity and how they were able to move and other flight dimensions, flight in quotes, and you think about what could have been refined to this time that we are now in capability, it starts to fall into place. For me, it becomes pretty obvious that there's different capabilities. So the next question is, well, why would you just get rid of all the aircraft carriers and all the aircraft and show this? Well, there's a huge part of our economy that is ground tied to what we do. And I will go back to a very dear president in this discussion when we talk about specifically UFOs, who's mentioned in many, many ways. Dwight Eisenhower made a very clear warning about our military industrial complex, that it's a very interwoven part of our economy and our entire culture, and it somewhat is a beast.
Right. Besides Eisenhower, he's often quoted. Can you think of any other presidents that have signaled the same warning, or has it been mum since?
I think he's probably the most pointed out of that capability. In fact, I just recently read some more where he's, the different addresses that he made post his time in the White House, and that's probably where most of it comes forward from. I can't think of others. It'll be interesting to see what happens with President Trump. He may be an interesting one to talk about that. What he will be making in statements from what he has seen from his position that he is in now. But I know there hasn't been others that have fallen. And to me, it seems like it was well crafted, viewed, analyzed. Maybe this is something we should prevent from being talked about like that post their position in the Oval Office.
Well, I guess the inverse of that would be Reagan and Trump, right? Particularly Reagan talking about a space force of his own, Star Wars defense system, and that would be an expansion of the military-industrial complex.
Remember, though, that in the Reagan years, again, on the face of it, that SDI was ridiculed from the start. It is the final thing that buried the Soviet enterprise. There was no possible way they could keep up with it once we had the ability to accurately detect and most likely intercept missiles.
Sure.
And then, of course, the final act was Desert Storm, and the capability to evade radar pretty much nullified the then going Soviet program of integrated air defenses that were so heavily linked that you could not deliver. The only thing you had was the ability to possibly shoot a missile to do that. So we had our mutually assured destruction kind of theory that was in play. Once the Nighthawk, the F-117, flew and did its act, so to speak, and the way it was presented, that it was much more successful. It was presented in the rosiest of terms. That compounded it, and you had a system that basically had gone bankrupt, and people that were tired of living under the boot. And I think it was a great thing that they changed, and that they were able to achieve some level of freedom.
I have a sense that the sudden urge to go to the moon has more to do with just other nations starting to get ahead of the curve, at least publicly.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's, I think China got to the moon and India's, on their way, and everyone's like, okay, all right, wait, we need to get back to the table here, because we don't know what they're going to do, after their first successful mission. And if we don't catch up to them, if we don't have a place,
well, I don't think it's us catching up to them. I don't think that. I think we still maintain, unless you're people that don't believe that we went to the moon. I'm not one of those folks. I am 100% convinced that we did all the missions that we did to the moon, and we took unbelievable risks to do that. I think what you're referring to is that there's a desire to, if claims are going to be made, if claims are going to be laid, we want to reestablish our piece of it, or our leadership role, quote unquote leadership role in that. And I can give you a more terrestrial example if you'd like.
Yeah, good.
Okay, Antarctica, the continent that no one seems to agree upon, except that we agree upon to continue to talk about it. We have treaties, we have countries that claim that Antarctica belongs to them. Or large swaths of it is their territory. We have a very strange community based on scientific exploration. We have a large base. We have a large presence. We basically control the South Pole station. There's a very interesting play that goes on there. That's on the face of it. I often am asked, did I ever see anything down there? And I didn't. I can easily understand the possibilities of an unbelievably vast continent, that there are many hidden secrets there from a Earth geological perspective, right up to all the other things of underground bases and all those things. Mm-hmm. I will give that a measure of nod that say yes, there's a possibility for some of it. Some of it I think doesn't wash very easily, but I think there's some merit to all those discussions. But just looking how we handled that continent, I think it's a good indicator for what we're going to do, or what's going to head with us with the moon.
I don't know. Maybe I might disagree with you a little bit, just because.
Hey, you're allowed. It's your show.
Yeah, Okay, so in recent years, I think the tension's actually been building because there is land now that's starting to open up there. The climate is changing. That's a discussion I don't want to get into, but we do know for a fact that the North Pole is beginning to open up a little bit, but
you are going to acknowledge that we have more sea ice than we this past year than we did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it goes up and down, but by and large, it's easier to navigate or becoming easier.
Right. We're definitely in a period.
Yeah.
And I don't mind talking about climate change. I agree with it as climate change.
I just don't want to detract from from the topic. But what I'm saying here is that in this area now you have a potential competition for resources that was non-existent up until recently, and the moon could become a new place of abundance of resources. Maybe moon, the helium-3 or something else. And that's where war and conflict comes into place, when humans are after the same resource. So that's my worry, and that's why I think that the president, and I'm sure everyone else in Congress, is in agreement. Like, yep, we need to get there just in case.
Oh, absolutely. Or think of it from this standpoint, regardless of what our particular personal opinions on climate change are. If you're able to obtain enough critical resources that make something like fusion a common capability in the next 50 years, having a presence on the moon, having the ability to do that, has all kinds of political and power situations all over it, and may be needed for, our next era of how we power the planet. I will say that I think that there are a lot of reasons why we continue to use the resources that we do. Again, going back to how the economy and things happen with how we move money and how we make money.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there is definitely capabilities, technologies that are at the forefront that may require, as you said, resources that are not readily available on this planet, but very close.
And then, of course, we have to touch on the fact that what if there is a space program, secret space program? Do you think that we are going to the moon? Because it's got to become more difficult to have a secret space program when people can start pointing telescopes at the moon and beyond. I mean, you have amateurs with amazing telescopes now pointing them all over our solar system. So if you do have a secret program, it must be really difficult to keep incognito.
Yeah, I don't think we're out of the Earth orbit capability. I don't think that we've exceeded that. The kinds of...
So you're not talking about kids being abducted and taken to Mars as slaves, that sort of thing, right?
I don't see anything like that. Yeah. I see it as a much more human-based enterprise that we have militarized a capability in Earth orbit that is, and we're signaling that to possible adversaries and allies that capability is there. I remember when the U.S. spoke of we have to be ready in Central Europe. If we go to war, we're going to fly in at 5,000 to 10,000 feet, which was just suicidal altitudes if we were going to try to penetrate and go against the Soviets. And the Allies looked at us like, you can't be serious that you want to do this. Well, we were signaling what we wanted to do, but we weren't showing anybody the capability of what the aircraft was. And it was flying and it was doing tests and it was showing great promise on its capabilities. And when Desert Storm came and it was used because it was going to allow a perfect model against the primary adversary to the West, in that you spent your money on your hard-earned treasure on this capability, and it was defeated by these aircraft. And then that allowed a great land army to move in. Right, and that was the final act for the Soviets.
And so
I see the same
what's
thing
the
as a mimic in our what we are terming a secret space program.
Okay.
But we have a treaty situation that I think is making it very difficult to move into that because they don't want to turn it into another arms race in orbit. But it's been going on since 1950s.
Right. And who do you think is going to be? Because I haven't really followed this story much aside from the announcement that we want to go back to the moon in 5 years. But who do you think will get the contract? You think SpaceX has the edge on this for getting the, or do you think Boeing is going to come in here and say, "Hey, we worked with NASA. We've done this before"?
I don't know. I think there's going to be. I think when you go to the larger programs, unless and I'm not well versed on each individual, it's going to be a large defense contractor that will put the array together, and that may not be the best, but it's probably the most tried and true model that we're going to follow.
So we're not going to see a collective Virgin,
I think
Bigelow,
there is, but everything that they're working with. Well, Bigelow's an interesting person in that because I think he plays well in all those areas because his technology and his approach, his entrepreneurial kind of activities, they're able to function very well with whomever is doing the work. He does very innovative stuff. Mm-hmm. When you look at Virgin, you look at some of the others, they have focused on Earth orbit activities with specific, goals. Right now, the vast majority of what we talk about is who can get satellites into space, payloads into position, and get them into good orbits, because that is absolutely, unbelievably critical to everything we do on the Earth. If you have a foreign power that decides to take out, they weaponize orbiting satellites that when they explode or they send out EMP, that wipes out and you can't use GPS to accurately position, all of a sudden you're not going to be flying. You're going to get lost when you're driving your car because no one knows how to read a map anymore. We laugh, but a lot of our technology, a lot of things that we do in our capabilities to move resources by ship are heavily dependent on this satellite array that we have up there. So whomever can put up replacements, who can back those up or put up ones that are secured that only they get to use, it's going to have a huge factor in any kind of warfare. It may be very bloodless or in comparison to past, but it's going to have far-reaching impacts, far-reaching implications in everything we do. As well as going back to what we started talking about in the beginning, you have a worldwide media engagement now. What used to take weeks, then became days, is down to seconds. If something happens while you and I are working this show on our computer screens, while we're talking and doing this show, we're going to get how many times does it come up when you've done your show? Bill will send me a note. This just happened. And we know almost within seconds now when an event occurs.
Oh, even recently in Queens, there was a electrical plant explosion. And, New Yorkers, we could look out the window and see this blue glowing light. So minutes later, I went to Twitter and then boom, tons of videos, commentary. It was out there in the public sphere before the news stations picked up on it.
Well, that's because the new media is what you just described.
Yeah.
The established media is a stalking horse in this situation. That's what I think leads to a lot of the false stories that the quote unquote fake news that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. What do you have to do to grab people's attention, to get them? Because if you don't have their attention and they're not viewing, then you're not looking at the advertising. If we don't have the advertising doesn't keep the station on the air. Right? That's the loop.
Yep.
Now the loop is within that who gets the views, who's got the number of people, and how can I flash up a number of ads while you're looking at your news feed and the items and the Twitter and that's going on.
Yeah.
And then why don't we mine and track what you're talking about to other people, and we will customize for a price the particular pieces of information to get, your hard-earned money out of your hands into somebody else's.
Do you know, with all the satellites up there looking down, how do governments secretively test aerial craft or any technology at this point?
I think a lot of it's done the tried and true ways. There are spots that you can't cover all the time that's on there. You show things in a certain way. You put fake things out. I mean, that the Soviets were actually quite good at this, and they were quite comical sometimes. They would have mock-ups that would move around, and when the fidelity wasn't very good, or in the days where they actually took pictures, and then a canister would drop out of the satellite, and it would be recovered in flight as it descended in a parachute. Very interesting mission and a very interesting application until they got to the point where you could transmit pictures. And now, of course, we have digital imagery that becomes available. But we still use photography, and we still use manned aircraft and unmanned aircraft to go to specific spots to look at that, because cloud cover can cause a lot of it. There are ways to do that, and there's ways to have people look in different directions. Area 51 is the greatest known secret on the planet.
Sure. No, it is. It's fascinating. I mean, back in the late 80s, it was pretty common for people to go out there and see some strange lights flying around. That was not uncommon.
And you can still do that. Just can't get quite as close to that. And I think the angle has been played up very, very much to get people's attention to look that way. And every now and then you'll see they just recently, in the last couple months, had a MiG-29 and an F-16 flying during the day and flying against each other and doing stuff.
Nice.
Now, why do you do something like that? Well, there's nothing to see here, folks. It's from an allied nation. The MiG-29 was there. We were doing some tests. Pilots were getting orientation on how to fly against it. That was a very secretive program in the 80s when we were actively flying recovered MiG and Sukhoi aircraft in the States to give fighter pilots the ability to know the best techniques. And we did that. That was a huge secret that was very carefully maintained until it was no longer. The Red Wing Air Force was no longer needed to be hidden as much.
Well, you mentioned cloud cover, and I wonder, is the government able to create fake clouds or seeded clouds to hide tests on purpose?
I know that we have spent a great deal of money over the years, and I mean a number of years, trying to come up with ways to control and to modify and specifically use weather or counter it. There are interesting projects that were done during World War II in England because the fog would roll in, and a way to make fog disappear over the runway, so when aircraft were coming back from their missions, they could actually get in and land. Of course, that was a very complicated process, but we did not have the level of instrument and radar that we take for common now on that. So, yep, I would imagine there's a certain amount of camouflage or desire to do that, but in most weather cases now, with things like synthetic aperture radar, infrared capabilities, there are ways to get fidelity, and of course, nothing is raw. You run it through computers with algorithms that will give you variations on what the shape looks like on that to come up with refinements. And if it's really that important and you really want to see what it is, then you're going to probably risk a manned or an unmanned aircraft that's air breathing to get close enough to take a look to get those pictures.
Earlier, you mentioned Ralph and Marcia.
Ring.
Ralph Ring, right?
Yep.
That link is also on your website, on the page, on the KGRA page.
It is.
And that's fascinating. So Can you just tell us in a couple of minutes a little bit about Ralph and his experience?
Ralph is one of those most amazing Renaissance men. Absolute privilege to become friends with him. His mix of hard science and technology and his spiritual philosophy, the blend is unbelievable. And what I mean by that is he was able to do things because he felt he could communicate and connect with the work he was doing. Specifically, early on when they were trying to get flows of electrons to move a certain way, he felt he could to join with that. But he was able to come up with the hard science, the hard technology to make that go forward. Incredibly interesting man. He was part of a project. He talks about visits that they made and the ability to absolutely change how we would be living globally with this breakthrough in technology, and how it came to a screeching halt because it was too fast, too rapid, and it was going to be too unsettling. I think we've been to this movie before. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. That folks that are in power, folks that are in the roles of at the higher levels of our society, don't really want to give that up, or often come to a conclusion that you really the masses are not ready for this. I don't particularly agree with that statement or that standpoint, but it's an obvious factor that that is how it has been. I mean, you look at how, as a society, what was the major change point that came up? Well, when the printing press arrived and we were able to now start producing, you didn't have to handwrite out every document, and you were able to now mass produce at a scale unknown to that point. The demand to be able to read became very, very important. Started our modern education system that we have today. Think about now what we spoke about earlier with how we get information and how we transmit and we share information now, and the capability. What we have, there's literally no place on the globe that you cannot get connection to the internet. Obviously, there's spots that don't have the same depth and coverage, but we're really at that point, especially with a satellite array, which is promised and is probably up.
Right.
So
it's an advancement of value that drags society with it, or society runs to it and says, "Hey, wait, we got to keep up with this."
And then pretty soon you have people go, why am I listening to these people when I can do this myself? Our discussion on the media and what we call new media. So Ralph's experience with that and how he explains and covers it is, it is absolutely amazing. And it's well worth the time listening to.
Was there anything directly passed down to him that was firsthand knowledge of Nikola Tesla?
Yes. Mr. Carr was a protege that worked with Tesla. And that was basically where Ralph worked for and the group that he was with. Yeah. And many people are doubtful of his claims. He has made available all the information that he has in his possession. It's there. And he talks quite freely about what he refers to as pods, groups of people that are around the globe that are very close to releasing this knowledge out. And he has some very interesting points that he makes about that. And when I spoke and last had him on the show, he talked about where at that time period. So much like many of the items that we covered tonight and you talk about on your show, we think we are all living in that period that we may be able to learn or have a major breakthrough coming up. I sure hope so, and I sure hope it's in a positive nature.
Certainly hope so, and in a positive nature, absolutely. I've always suspected that, it probably is. Of course, when it comes to speculation, that's all it is, because if there's some extraterrestrial entity spying on us, watching us, has some motive, who knows? That's the point. There's just no way we can get into the mind of an alleged alien species, right?
Right. I agree. So I want to very quickly thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
It's been a real honor and a privilege to be with you.
Thank you.
And I have never had a UFO type event. Everything that I encountered, I eventually was able to figure out or be told this is something you're not supposed to be looking at because it's a project. It's a black program or a very sensitive test program. A lot of times they were involved in the activities we were in as either an important part of the operation or to see if it would be detected kind of capability. But I have had a number of folks that have relayed interesting experiences that have always made me think that we definitely have a possibility, a very strong possibility, and I do think that we have been and are continued to be visited by extraterrestrials. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I just don't have any irrefutable proof to point to.
So based on the evidence at hand, you believe, but you can't say for a fact.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's much like my belief in God. It's there and it's faith-based. I can point to things that I interpret that prove that, and I feel the same thing about extraterrestrials.
If Nikola Tesla were brought back to life for however long, and you were allowed to ask him one question, what would you ask him?
I guess more than anything else, I would love to have his explanation of where he was approaching the moving of matter, and his, I guess, a follow-up, if I was able to get that. He was very close, if he had not perfected it, the ability to move or gather electrical power from the atmosphere. And I think that may be where we're headed as a very important capability.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. His power system, world power system, the animations that I would see of that, right? There's this like electricity going up into the air and then spreading around and coming back, and I'm thinking, with today's technology, would that be able to be integrated? I mean, I don't know, what radiation that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, would that interfere with our technology? Would it be, free energy, but it would cause other problems?
I think Mr. Tesla's greatest gift and greatest problem is that he wanted electricity to be free.
Right.
And imagine the world where electricity was cleanly generated and is as available as the air we breathe.
Yep.
Imagine where we would be as a planet if that was the capability.
Do you know the story of Tesla? He really got screwed out of a lot of money.
Yes.
Early on. What company was that? I can't remember.
Well, Westinghouse is where a lot of it went through, but he also crossed swords with some of the great financial barons of their time.
Yeah.
And they hounded him to the point of near insanity, and he was broke at the end of it.
But he wasn't the best businessman. My understanding is that
he was a horrible businessman.
Yeah.
But unbelievably creative and unbelievably talented. And he was not motivated, I don't think, by finance. And that's very interesting when you hear Ralph Ring talk about it seems to be the same kind of thing that Mr. Carr pursued. They were looking for the way that was going to elevate, that tide that was going to come to lift all boats.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably his greatest gift and his Achilles heel at the same time.
Yeah, imagine the world we'd live in if Tesla got just a fraction of the profits from Westinghouse that he should have gotten. I mean, and had a fortune to live off for the rest of his life.
Imagine the world that we would be living in. Yeah. We wouldn't be doing this show if some of the things that his patents, his name is on thousands of patents that are out there of systems that we are using today.
Yep. All right, we're at the end. Commander Cobra, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Alan, for having me. And you have a wonderful audience, and I look forward to maybe we can do it again.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so to find out more about Commander Cobra, just go to kgrradio.com, Task Force Griffin, and then he's got a couple of other links up there. You can contact him via email if you have any questions. That's it. So you've been listening to Paranormal Now, broadcasting Thursdays at 1 a.m. on KGRA Radio, your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. To find out more, you can go to kgrradio.com/paranormalnow or paranormalnow.net, and on social media, facebook.com/paranormalnow, and on Twitter @paranormal_now. And until next time, check out Paranormal Pop on YouTube and live in the mystery. All right. Be well, everyone.